Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to do a wrap up today of both December and January. It feels like forever since I've done a book wrap up, like a monthly wrap up, and December was a little bit of a weird month and I didn't read a whole lot, which is funny because I specifically said that during the time that I was off, like that's all I was going to do was read. But it turned out I ended up just watching a whole heck of a lot of movies and shows and all the things. I had a really bad kidney infection in December, and by the time work wrapped up before the holidays, I was just finished. So Matt and I watched a lot of movies, a lot of shows, and all of that kind of stuff during December. So I didn't get a whole lot of reading done. So I figured, okay, well, I'll just let the wrap up roll over into January and just do one big one all at the one time. So two things that I wanted to note in case you didn't hear them in other videos. Number one of my goals for 2022 is actually to lower my expectation and my goals. So my goal for 2022 is to read 50 books. Last year I read 89 and I found it was a little bit too much, and because I'm trying to work on other projects, I brought that goal down. So I'm going to be reading less this year. And the other thing, if you hadn't watched my vlog where I went through my reading journal, is I'm no longer going to be doing set TBRs. So I'm hoping that when I just go pick a book off a shelf, when I'm ready to pick up something new, that it can kind of prevent me from going into slumps because I feel like, oh, I've absolutely got to read these specific books. So gonna try to be a little bit more of a mood reader this year and see how that goes. So I have noticed that in January, when I didn't have a set TBR, I did at the beginning of January and then I just scrapped it all. January was a really good month and I enjoyed all of the books that I read. I felt like there was no pressure because there was no set amount of books that I had to read. I didn't have a specific reading list and I just really enjoyed it. So January was a really great month. I had numerous 5-star books in January. So because December was a little bit more of a lower end of a mediocre month, January definitely made up for that. So starting off with December, so I read The Diviners finally in December by Libba Bray, and I was so excited to start reading this book. It's a booktube darling. Everyone who has read it has really enjoyed it, and I did enjoy it. I gave this book 4 stars, and if you don't know what this is about, it's the first book in a series that follows a, I believe, 16-year-old girl named Evie, and she moves to New York City to live with her uncle because she's kind of been ousted by her family because there was a scandal, and she goes to live with her uncle, and he's the curator of an occult museum, and he gets called in on these murders, these occult murders, and Evie tags along, and she has a gift that she believes can help solve these murders. So like I said, overall enjoyed this book. I really liked the whole concept of the occult killer and that whole storyline. I thought it was really good. But the two things that I didn't like about this book were, number one, I found it was just a bit too long. It was really dragged out, but of course, like I said, it's the first in a series, so it could pick up in subsequent books. And the other thing is that Evie herself as a character, I just wasn't jiving with Evie. I really didn't like her. Just her personality, her quirks. It just, I didn't really love her. So really good book. Totally recommend picking it up, especially if you're into like crime series and stuff like that, and the occult and all that sort of thing. It has a high level of like supernatural in here, but for me personally, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with the series because, like I said, Evie and I don't really jive. But overall, you know, good book. I would recommend picking it up. For me, myself, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with the series. I don't know if I liked it enough to actually, you know, keep reading the subsequent books. Haven't really decided because, like I said, December was a little bit of a weird month, so I'm just going to put this aside and maybe I'll pick up the series sometime again later down the road. And the next book that I read in December was actually a reread for me. It's The Hand on the Wall, which is the third book in the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. And I love this series. I think it's really, really well done. It's a real page turner. Like I said, I wanted to reread book 3 because there was actually a 4th book added in this series, and I wanted to pick up the 4th book in December as well, which I ended up not doing. But I did reread The Hand on the Wall, and one thing that I noticed, because I gave this whole series 5 stars the first time I read it, it's funny when you kind of go back and reread things, you sort of notice things that you didn't see or that didn't really bother you the first time around, but then you start to pick up on subplots and stuff like that. And when I was rereading the whole storyline of Stevie and her love interest was very evident to me, because I think the first time around I was so wrapped up in the mystery and the murders and all of that that I kind of let the rest of it fall by the wayside. And this is something that I find, and I've said numerous times, that in YA, love interests and the types of guys that girls are interested in are very problematic. And I won't get into it too much, but if you read this book and you concentrate on that subplot and not just on the murders and the mystery and everything, it is very evident that, you know, it was kind of bothering me this second time around, because I knew how the mystery wrapped up and I knew how the murders wrapped up. So it was becoming kind of evident to me. So I did bring my star rating on this series down to a 4, because I really do think that the target audience of these books, you know, it can kind of give the perception that these kinds of relationships are okay, and it's okay for girls to be treated like this, and it's really not. But this is still a fantastic series. Like, I read it for the murder mystery and the mystery of the school and the whole thing. So I'm gonna pick up the 4th book soon, because I wanted to have the mystery and the murders fresh in my mind. So probably in the next month or so, I'm gonna pick up the 4th book finally. And I'm hoping that it's gonna fit well with the first 3 books, because originally it was just supposed to be a trilogy, and the 4th one was just kind of added on after the series became super, super popular. So hoping to pick that up soon, and I'll let you guys know how that one goes. And next up in December, I read The Dead Girls Club by Damien Angelica Walters. And just to give a quick recap on this book. So this book is a dual timeline. So in the one timeline, it takes place in 1991, and it's a group of girls, and they call themselves the Dead Girls Club because they love exchanging stories about serial killers and the macabre and legends and all of that kind of stuff. And they are very much into this legend of the Red Lady, where you look into a mirror and you say, Red Lady, show us your face." And so it's very much like Candyman or Bloody Mary, and, you know, all kinds of creepy things start happening, and one of the girls gets sort of obsessed with this legend, and not a spoiler, it's right in the synopsis, but she ends up dead. So then fast forward into present day. One of the girls of this club is now an adult. She's grown up, and she is like a psychologist or a psychiatrist now at this point. And she receives a package in the mail that has the necklace of the girl that had died years and years and years before. But when she died, she actually was wearing the necklace. So someone knows something about that had happened that night that they shouldn't know. So this kind of sets her off onto a quest to find out who's harassing her, and they keep harassing her throughout this book, that they know something. She's kind of freaking out because the story of what really happened to the girl years ago was never really revealed, and she's pretty much the only one who knows. So this sounds like a fantastic story, and it started out pretty good, but as the story started to develop, it just wasn't for me. The things that this woman was doing in present day, that was the member of the Dead Girls Club, some of the things that she was doing didn't make sense. It was very childish. Her best friend from 1991, the girl that ended up dead, they were inseparable and all of that sort of thing. But this girl was super unlikable. She treated everybody horribly. And the thing that I noticed in this story, because what usually happens in these books is the girls have a really close friendship and they're super sweet to each other, and then you kind of see this friendship kind of unravel, and one of them starts acting, you know, really outlandish and all of that kind of thing. And right from the very beginning of this book, the girl was super unlikable, and I'm like, it doesn't even make sense that she's your friend. So I found that the plot could have been done a lot better, the characters could have been done a lot better, and just as it was starting to wrap up at the end, it's something that's been done before. And so super fantastic premise, but I found it just didn't execute for me. So only 2 stars for this one, unfortunately. And I read this one on audio while I was putting together my reading journal, and I was just really hoping that the ending was gonna wrap everything up, and I was just a little bit disappointed with this one. So unfortunately I can't recommend it, even though the synopsis sounds absolutely fantastic. It just didn't come to fruition for me, unfortunately. And then the last book that I read in December was All These Bodies by Kendara Blake. And I read this book because I had heard so many good things about the Anna Dressed in Blood series, and then she had a Buffy book that came out in January, so I really kind of wanted to get a feel for her writing before I read the new Buffy book. And unfortunately this one was a DNF for me. So this kind of revolves around these serial murders that are taking place. And at all of the murder scenes, there's multiple bodies, but there's no blood anywhere. And they can't figure out what's happening with all this blood. But at one of the murder scenes, there is a girl there and she's covered in blood. Everybody thinks that she's a victim who has survived, but it turns out none of the blood is hers. So she's incarcerated, and she will only tell the story to the sheriff's son. So sounds really good. Unfortunately, the reason why I DNF'd this was, as the story was going on, I just didn't really care. Like, when I would put this book down, I really didn't care to pick it back up again. It was kind of slow moving, and it was just a little bit too fantastical to me. Like, this kid that was the sheriff's son and his friends, like, they were utilized in this investigation, and they were trusted to take down the confession of a killer. And I'm like, he doesn't have, like, kids don't have interrogation skills and stuff like that. So it just, I couldn't sink into it because the whole premise seemed a little bit too fantastical to me. And, you know, I even kept telling myself, okay, well, you know, just enjoy the story sort of thing. But I just couldn't get into it. It was bothering me. And like I said, it was kind of slow moving. I just didn't really care. I think I was about 50 or 60% into the book. And I was like, I don't care anymore. So I put it down. I'm not sure if this is a DNF, like, permanently, or if I'll pick it up again. But right now, like, I can't see myself picking it up again. So unfortunately, this one didn't work out for me whatsoever. But there was nothing wrong with Kendara Blake's style of writing, so I'm hoping that the Buffy book will be interesting to me. And I'm hoping, I also did download the Anna Dressed in Blood duology, so I'm hoping that that series I'll kind of get into a little bit more. But unfortunately, this one, it just didn't work for me. So that was it for December. Like I said, December was kind of a weird month. Like, I couldn't really get into a whole lot, and I wasn't really reading a whole lot, and the books that I did read were just kind of mediocre. But January, on the other end of the spectrum, was a fantastic reading month. And I'm so glad, because I didn't want to let myself spiral into yet another reading slump. So the first book that I read in January was Served Cold. So this is the newest HorrorTube anthology from R. St. Clair and Steve Donahue. So if you don't know about this book, all of the stories in here, it's a short story collection that revolves around cold weather horror, and all of the authors are your favorite horror tubers here on YouTube. And I did a very long vlog, reading vlog for this book, so if you haven't seen it, go back and enjoy that. And I go through each story after I finish them and my thoughts. But this turned out to be a fantastic collection. A lot of the stories, because it's cold weather horror and everything is dark and bleak, there was kind of this continuous theme of like claustrophobia and just desolation throughout the whole thing. But the surprising part of this was a lot of the stories have deeper meanings in them. There's a lot that has to do with family ties. I cried several times reading the book. I thoroughly enjoyed this collection. I think it has to be one of the best anthologies, horror anthologies that I've read, just for the simple fact that there wasn't a single story in here that I didn't enjoy. And, you know, obviously some of them I liked better than others, but everyone did a fantastic job. So if you don't have your copy of Served Cold yet, make sure you go onto Amazon and pick up your copy. And I'll leave a link to my vlog down below as well if you want to go back and hear my thoughts on each and every single story. So can't wait for the next one to come out. Nothing has been announced. I'm just hoping that they're going to continue on with this, because if they keep writing these, I will continue to buy them. So I think I even like this one better than Local Haunts, which I thoroughly enjoyed as well. So highly recommend picking up Served Cold. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Next up, I read the Amityville Horror, and it's so funny that I hadn't read this book ever before, because Amityville is one of my favorite stories. Like the true story of what happened in Amityville is fantastic to me. I've seen a lot of documentaries, I've done a lot of research into it, and whether you believe that this is real or it's a hoax, whatever you believe, the book is just a fantastic piece of horror literature. If you want to take it as fiction, it's great. And that's how I read this book, because I really do believe that this is a piece of fiction. And it can be kept completely separate from what actually happened in the house in Amityville. So I gave this 4 or 4.5 stars, I can't remember. It was a great piece of fiction. I thought it was really well written. There were just a couple of spots where it was a little bit clunky, and it kind of started, the timelines between what was happening with the family and what was happening with the priest kind of converged a little bit too much, so I got confused in just 1 or 2 spots, but it didn't take me out of the reading experience at all. And like I said, it's just a great haunted house story. If you, no matter what your biases are on the true story, if it's a hoax, if it's true, if parts of it are true, I just think it's a great piece of fiction. And I thought it was well written, and I really enjoyed the story. It's a classic, of course, in the genre, so if you haven't picked it up, please do, and read it just as a piece of fiction. So I'm definitely going to be continuing on with other Amityville books. I do have a couple here. So I'm hoping to actually get them on digital copy, because my copies are vintage and I don't want to ruin them. But I will definitely be reading more books like this in the series, and I think it's going to be high time to do a rewatch of the 1979 movie as well. So Amityville Horror, I really enjoyed this and highly recommend that you guys pick it up too. And the next book that I read was Blankie by Keelan Patrick Burke. So this is just a very short novella. I don't even know if you can call it a novella. It's probably a novelette. And this is the same author that did Sour Candy as well, that I read a few months ago. And this one has to do basically with this father who is grieving the death of his child, and his wife is grieving as well, and she has moved out, and he goes upstairs into what would have been the child's bedroom, and finds their blanket, their favorite blanket, on the floor, and it sets off this whole series of crazy happenings. And it is crazy. This book is absolutely insane with what happens, and I don't want to get too much into the synopsis, because like I said, it's only like probably not even a novella length. I believe it's maybe 100 pages, maybe a little over 100 pages. But I loved this book. The exploration of grief and trauma and like all of that is heart-wrenching. It is really heart-wrenching. So I would caution anybody that has experienced the loss of a child or who would be highly impacted by that to probably steer clear of this one, because I'm not a parent and I found it just tore my heart right out of my body. So there was that aspect of it, but the other aspect of the actual like horrific story that was going on was wild. It was outrageous. Like, I was sitting there and I was giving Matthew like a play-by-play of what was happening with this book, because it was so good. It was imaginative, and like I said, it had that deeper meaning in there and all of that. And I love books that, even though they're very short, they have a lot of depth, and you could write an entire thesis on this book, even though it's probably less than 100 pages. I think it's around 100 pages, and fantastic story. So if you haven't picked up this one yet, I highly recommend it. This was a 5-star read for me. I highly likely will pick this one up again because it's just totally wild. The story is wild, and just the kind of feelings that it evokes is fantastically done. So between Sour Candy and Blankie, I will definitely be picking up more of Keelan Patrick Burke's writing in the future, and hopefully the other books that I read will be on par with the kind of emotion that it draws out of you as these other two that I read. And the next book I picked up was The Hay Bale by Priscilla Bettis. And if that name sounds familiar to you, you've probably seen Priscilla down in my comments and in other people's comment sections here on HorrorTube. She's a huge supporter of everyone's channels here. And she always comments, she always leaves the most wonderful suggestions and comments, and you know, she's just a huge supporter of this community. And I had no idea she had a book coming out until I saw it over on, I believe Josh from Coffee Cats and King had brought it up. So I downloaded it right away and I read it. So this is just a very short novelette, and I will have a review coming up probably in my next video on the channel, so I'm not going to get into anything here, but this book is on a different level. So much like Blankie that I also read, this one was very surprising. So I'm gonna leave all of my thoughts for my review video, but this is something else that I did read in January as well. And then the next book I read in January was The Time Watchers by Robbie Miles. So this is an ARC copy of Robbie's new book that's going to be coming out in March. And I was so very grateful that he shipped one all the way up to Canada. And this is another book that I did a full reading vlog on, so I'll leave a link to it down below. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. And this book just screams Halloween. So here we follow 3 kids. Their names are Amy, Sam, and Jack. And they're getting together for a sleepover Halloween extravaganza. So October 30th falls on a Friday, so they're planning on spending the whole weekend together, eating pizza and watching movies and candy and doing Halloween and carving pumpkins and the whole thing. And then something happens, and one of the kids actually gets kidnapped by the Watcher, who is the antagonist in this book. And they think that the Watcher is a fictional character, but one of the kids ends up going missing, and the other 2 kids have to go on an adventure, and it is an adventure to rescue him. And this book is just so multi-layered. It's nostalgic because you think about, you know, the way that The Sleepover is written, and it just brings back so many memories of having sleepovers as kids and watching scary movies and eating all the junk food and, you know, holding the flashlight up to your face and telling scary stories and the whole thing. And then you move into the adventure of when the 2 kids have to go rescue their friend from the Watcher. And the adventure is just so imaginative, and it has echoes of books and movies that we loved as kids, like Hocus Pocus and Ernest Scared Stupid, and even Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and stuff like that. And then the overwhelming theme in this book, though, is the story of friendship. You're right there with the kids as they're going through all of this. And then of course when they get to their friend, there's other kids there and they're trying to figure out how to help these other kids. And right towards the end of this book, Halloween just explodes. The Halloween stories and the characters, and there's trolls and witches and jack-o'-lanterns and all kinds of stuff going on in here. I gobbled this book up just in a couple of days, and it's one of those books that you allow yourself to sink into the story, and it's hard to pull yourself back out. So this is a middle grade Halloween adventure, and Robbie's writing has gotten so much better even just since his last book that came out in at the beginning of 2021. So I highly recommend everyone go order their copy in March. I will let you guys know the exact date of when this is coming out. I don't think it's been announced quite yet, but it is going to be in March, and it's a fantastic story. So anyone who has baby bats at home or is a kid at heart themselves will thoroughly enjoy this story. I really did, and I will continue to support Robbie's writing. He's, you know, a super fantastic writer, and his adventures are just outstanding. So I gave this book 4.5 stars. I thought it was great. I will let you guys know as soon as I know when the actual release date is. And the last book that I read in January was Paul Bernardo and Karla Homoka, The True Story of the Ken and Barbie Killers by Peter Vronsky. And this book I had heard of originally from Jason White at Jason's Weird Reads. We were a part of a collaboration video on Played by Vision's channel, and this book was the book that Jason picked that was the most disturbing read he has ever read. And if you know anything about Paul Bernardo and Karla Homoka, they are two of the most disgusting criminals in Canadian history. And I already knew a great deal about the case and the brutality of it, but this book goes into like next level description and backstory and everything. It goes right back to Paul's childhood and the type of family he grew up in, and what his own father was doing. And it's not often with true crime that I feel like I have to fast forward something or turn it off. Like, it usually doesn't bother me to that degree, but the descriptions and the detail that this goes into was just next level. I did listen to the whole thing, but it was just heart-wrenching, the types of things that these two people did. And like I said, I know the case very well, but this book really filled in a lot of the gaps and a lot of the information that if you're watching a documentary on TV or somebody's talking about it on YouTube or whatever, they leave those parts out. So this really did go into shocking detail, and it really opened the case up from beginning to end. So I feel very fulfilled in my knowledge of the case, kind of like when I read Helter Skelter. It was the same sort of situation with that, because I had known a lot about the Manson murders and their crimes, but the book really filled in a lot of the gaps. So the same thing with this one here. So if you're into true crime at all, highly recommend picking up this one. I read this one on audiobook as well, and it was really well done. And I think it was only like 2 or 2.5 hours long. So really super short, but it was just loaded with information. So highly recommend picking up that one. I believe I gave that one 4.5 or maybe even 5 stars as well. It was totally gruesome, and as a true crime fan myself, I was very much fulfilled in that I now know the story totally from beginning to end with these two. So that was the last book that I read in January. I did start another one, but it continued into February, and so I think I started it on like the 31st. So I'm just gonna let that one roll over into my next monthly wrap up. But for the books that I did read in December and January, like I said, it was kind of a mixed bag. December was kind of mediocre, and I didn't read anything that was over the top. But then January, it's almost like every single book that I read was completely fulfilling. So I was super happy with how the first month of 2022 ended up. And I'm going to continue with not doing TBRs anymore, so unfortunately I won't have TBR videos on the channel, but I will continue to do these monthly wrap-ups and then reviews throughout the month as well. I've kind of started to get into doing vlogs a little bit more, so really enjoying doing the vlogs, so I'll continue with that throughout 2022 as well, as long as you guys want to continue to watch them. So there you go, that's it for this video. I hope I suggested some books that you guys can add to your TBRs as well. Let me know if you guys have read any of these and what you thought of them. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give me a thumbs up and leave me a question or a comment down below, because you know I love chatting with you guys. But until next time, stay spooky everybody. Bye.